Chapter 21. After the temper subsides and one has a moment to calmly reflect, it isn't uncommon for declarations shouted in a fit of rage to strike one as untrue, and because they may have been hurtful to family, friends, lovers, husbands, or wives, one wishes them unsaid. But this was not the case with 11-year-old Alice Hart, who had waited with impatience for the Reverend Charles Dodgson to complete the book describing her life in Wonderland, all the while entertaining visions of comeuppance for those who had doubted her. When Dodgson at last presented her with a copy of the book during a picnic of cold chicken and salad along the River Cherwell, and she discovered that it had little to do with her and that he'd purposely twisted everything she had told him into nonsense, how could he? A vicious joke. Anger filled her to the tips of her fingers. If her talk of Wonderland wasn't fantasy, it might as well have been for all the hurt and trouble it had caused her. She meant exactly what she said, and never once, in all the years afterward, regretted it. "You're the cruelest man I've ever met, Mr. Dodgson, and if you believed a single word I told you, you'd know how very cruel that is. I never want to see you again. Never, ever, ever." She left Dodgson on the riverbank, perplexed, and ran the entire way home. She stomped into the hall and slammed the door behind her, surprising Mrs. Liddell. "What, back already?" But Alice, her face twisted with grief and rage, didn't stop. "A cruel, vicious man. What am I supposed to do now? Can't live as odd Alice." She took the stairs, 2 at a time, up to her room and locked the door. "Alice," Mrs. Liddell called, following her. "Where are Edith and Lorena? Where's Mr. Dodgson? What's happened?" Alice wouldn't say, nor would she come out of her room. She didn't hear Mrs. Liddell knocking at the door, the annoyed but futile turning of the doorknob, or the imperious demand, "Alice, open this door. Open it this minute." The blood roared in her veins, and suddenly she was ripping the drawings of Hart Palace off her walls a fistful at a time, tearing them into confetti. "No more. Erase it all. I will no longer be Odd Alice. Odd Alice must die." Yes, it was a solution. Give up her so-called ridiculous, fantastical delusions and enter wholeheartedly into the world around her. Become just like everyone else. Listen. Mrs. Liddell was no longer accosting the door to her room. She heard voices downstairs. Dodgson and her sisters must have returned. The beastly man. "Alice, come downstairs," Mrs. Liddell called. "Mr. Dodgson is here." "I won't see him." Thinking afresh on what he had done, remembering the feel of his idiotic book in her hands, she became enraged all over again. "He tricked me, a man with a heart of ice," and kicked at the heaps of confetti lying on the floor. What was... Something had moved in the looking glass. Not a reflection of herself, of anything in the room. No, it was Genevieve, dressed as Alice last remembered her, but without her crown. "Never forget who you are, Alice," Genevieve said. "Shut up," Alice cried, and threw a pillow at the looking glass. Her mother, or whoever the woman in the mirror was, had never been through what she'd had to deal with these last 4 years. The mirror was suddenly empty, reflecting only the room. But of course, nobody had been in the mirror. How stupid. Her imagination had been playing tricks on her. Exhausted, Alice dropped to the floor sobbing. Before long, she fell asleep amidst the scraps of paper palaces. When she emerged from her room the next morning, a room perfectly clean, no confetti on the floor, no sign of the violence done to it hours earlier, the Liddells were at breakfast in the dining room. They immediately noticed a change in Alice without being able to pinpoint what it was. Edith and Lorena fell still, mid-chew, their mouths open, revealing a mash of scrambled egg. Dean Liddell paused in the midst of buttering his scone, and Mrs. Liddell continued pouring tea into her cup even after it spilled over onto the saucer. Not until the servants started to clean it up did she notice what she had done. "You're wearing the dress," Mrs. Liddell said. The dress she had purchased months before, but which Alice had always refused to wear because she feared it would make her appear common. "Yes, Mother." "But that wasn't it. Didn't account for the change. You look rather lovely," said Dean Liddell. "Thank you, Father." The change was in subtler things. The tilt of Alice's head, the particular sweep of her arms, her careful steps forward. The Liddells were so taken with her appearance that they failed to realize it was the first time she had ever called them by the most intimate of endearments, Mother and Father.